The President. Government Bill. This Council resumes the second reading debate on the Appropriation Bill 2022. This meeting is the second budget meeting. Members have been informed that the second reading debate will be conducted today and tomorrow, and only members may speak. Next Wednesday, that is the 4th of May, the third budget meeting will be held to continue with the second reading debate on the bill. Public officers will speak then to reply to members' views. If the motion on the second reading is passed, this Council will become the committee of the whole Council to consider the bill. The debate will end at around 7 p.m. today and will resume at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I wish to remind members that in accordance with the House rules, each member may speak once for up to 10 minutes in the second reading debate on a bill. The speaking order of members will be based on the order by which members press the request to speak button. If members wish to speak today, please press the request to speak button as soon as possible. Mr. Jimmy Ng. Thank you, President. For the budget last year, the Financial Secretary forecasts a cycle of deficits for Hong Kong. But miraculously, Hong Kong recorded a surplus of $18.9 billion, which wasn't easy at all. And that was thanks to the efforts of the Financial Secretary, who provided oversight on our finances. And he has been shrewd financially. As for the prediction of a better performance for Hong Kong with an annual growth in GDP of 2 to 3.5%, and by 2023 to 24, a surplus is expected. I do not want to be too optimistic, and no one can see into the future, but I am afraid there will be some time before we can enjoy a rebound. In the budget, the Financial Secretary proposed initiatives to support enterprises. One, we can support the operation of enterprises and to aid their recovery. In the fifth wave of the pandemic, it has been the most severe wave over the past 2 years in terms of casualties and number of people affected, and Hong Kong's economy has been affected. According to the latest Purchasing Managers Index, it declined from 48.9 in January to 42.9 in February. Hong Kong's economy shrank for 2 straight months, and we recorded the steepest decline since April 2020. And the number of orders and order volume declined as well, and the decline in February widened. In light of the economic plight facing Hong Kong, the Financial Secretary proposed a commitment of $170 billion in countercyclical measures. As for the other regular reductions or concessions, for example, concession in utility fees, I'm happy to see that Consumption Voucher 2.0 was rolled out. But how can the budget allow SMEs to continue to operate? This would be empirical. Over the past 2 years or so, many SMEs were able to survive thanks to the 2 rounds of employment support scheme rolled out by the government. The government adopted my and the BPA's proposal by rolling out the 3rd round of the ESS on March the 18th. In order to support SMEs and retain jobs, and in the proposal announced in April, the government further adopted the views of the DPA and the industry, including removing the cap on subsidy and relaxing the number of employees and no longer excluding certain industries, etc. This shows the FS's commitment on supporting enterprises. Apart from retaining jobs, we must also work to retain talent, capital, and the prerequisite is to reopen our borders. Recently, there were calls to first reopen the borders with Macau and the mainland so that we can adopt the dynamic zero strategy with Hong Kong characteristics. We must sustainably achieve zero infections rather than achieving absolute zero. As people daily pointed out, zero infections do not mean no infections, but the key is to curb the transmission chains as soon as possible. This is a scientific-based approach that would minimize the impacts of the pandemic on the economy. And this this would not come into conflict with reopening the borders. We must be pragmatic and adopt the right attitude. If Hong Kong continues to stall in terms of reopening of the borders, we will enter a vicious cycle and we will stand to lose much economically, and our status as a financial hub could be jeopardized, and talent and capital might not return at all, and it would be hard to boost our markets. Recently, we have scrutinized the employment amendment bill on offsetting the MPF or abolishing the MPF offsetting arrangement. The government has taken in the views of the public and the trades in recent years over the bill. The period for or the support period for enterprises has been increased to 25 years, and with global economic recession, many of Hong Kong's enterprises are facing a deeper plight and we question whether the rash decision to abolish the MPF offsetting arrangement by the government is appropriate. Since the fifth wave started, unemployment rose to 4.5% at 157,000. Last month, the government offered a $10,000 temporary unemployment relief. More than 400,000 applications were received, so we could see that the unemployment rate announced by the government did not cover the hidden cases of unemployment. As Hong Kong's business environment continues to deteriorate, once the abolishment bill is passed at LegCo, the operating costs of enterprises would rise. Apart from offering more support measures for SMEs in light of the economic conditions, the government should suspend all policies that would increase the cost of business in order to help SMEs. In terms of reindustrialization, as a representative for manufacturers, the budget did not say much about reindustrialization, and no concrete proposals were offered to help enterprises upgrade themselves. And the lack of efforts in industrialization is one of the shortfalls of Hong Kong. Apart from reinforcing our technological capabilities, we must facilitate the combination of technology and our industries, and this would help upgrade our traditional industries and create economic impetus. In terms of reindustrialization, I'd like to offer a novel vision. We should facilitate new green and low carbon initiatives, and that should be the path to go. And with the participation of some 200 countries, the voluntary carbon development plan has achieved results. As of last August, the transaction exceeded some $740 billion US, up 58%. The SAR government is promoting innovation and technology as well as no carbon technology. Carbon reduction technologies would be rolled out across different industries. Hong Kong has a mature financial market, and this would create backing for a carbon reduction platform. The HKEX requires further disclosures, and many enterprises have establish their own carbon neutrality targets, and they would purchase carbon credits to offset their carbon emissions. So in terms of achieving carbon neutrality, the efforts could create a bottom-up ecosystem, and this would be conducive to facilitating reindustrialization. In the Greater Bay, in the Greater Bay Area, Hong Kong will play a key role in the low-carbon transformation. As a whole, the budget propose a number of targeted alleviation measures as well as counter-cyclical measures. Ample resources will be offered to Hong Kong to help the public and enterprises deal with the challenges. And on the other, economic resilience would be reinforced and capacity would be created. Hong Kong will become a more livable city, and medium to long-term plans have been established, and Hong Kong will return to the road to prosperity. Mr. Dominic Lee. Thank you. Hong Kong has been bothered by the pandemic for more than 2 years, and since the fifth wave started, people from all strata of the society have faced steep challenges. The budget could solve some imminent problems, for example, by offering the consumption vouchers, and the New People Party's proposal of tax deduction has been adopted, and we support the budget as a whole. It has been almost 25 years since reunification. Many of our grassroots are still not living a dignified life. They are living in cage housing and subdivided units. There are plenty of such families. Our poverty gap is appalling. As a prosperous city with reserves of some $946 billion, did the government pay attention to these forgotten people back in the era of the warring states? It was said that if if those in power were wealthy, the state might not be sustainable for a long time, and we need to ensure that everyone could achieve or enjoy wealth, or else the state would not be sustainable. Even though Hong Kong is just a city, I think the same principles would apply. Some 2,000 years ago, our predecessors understood the importance of returning wealth to the people, whereas the SAR government sits on wealthy reserves, but they have ignored the plight of the grassroots. Does it mean that they do not understand these principles? President, the pandemic has completely exposed some of our long-standing problems. Recently, a dignified one of our friends, Ms. Wat Wing Yin, both of her parents contracted COVID, and her father unfortunately passed away after being admitted to hospital. Ms. Wat said found a hospital full of dead bodies. The A&E ward was completely crammed. At that time, an ambulance took a pregnant lady to the hospital, and but they were stopped because the hospital said they did not have the manpower, and the family of the patient had to transfer the patient or the pregnant woman to another hospital by taking a taxi. So that shows the problem our healthcare system has. Even before the pandemic started, public healthcare was under strain, and E wards were all full. Waiting time was getting longer and longer. Perhaps the officials do not know much about it, but for members of the public like us, we knew what the situation looked like. The pandemic simply exposed these long-standing problems. And in the 2022 to 23 financial year, the government only earmarked $92.1 billion to the hospital authority, even though this represented an increase of 11% from the past year. But this allocation has included the extra allocation of $7.5 billion to fight COVID. So if we deduct this special allocation, the extra allocation to the HA is just $1.6 billion, or less than 2%. The government officials have been thanking the healthcare professionals, but in terms of the actual allocation of funds, they have been very mean. And if we see a new wave of the pandemic, will our healthcare system see another collapse? Housing is another area that needs to be addressed, and it shows a lack of empathy from the SAR governments. Before I became legislator, I used to be the district councillor of Sham Shui Po. Even though my constituency was not considered as a grassroots area, I worked with other other members like Leung Men Kwong, and we visited those living in subdivided units. I once distributed resources in a subdivided unit. I met a kid who was about 6 to 7 years old. I had a chat with the kid, and I asked what he wanted, and he said he wanted a writing desk. He told me that his flat could not accommodate a table, so he had to read on his bed and write there. So it was really difficult for him. So I felt very sad hearing what he said. At that time, I just became father. My son was about 3 years old. And even though, well, my family isn't wealthy, but at least my child could live a comfortable life. Why is there such a big difference between the fates of different children? I wanted to buy a desk for this child because I knew that even if I gave him a desk, it could not fit in his unit. Their life would only improve if they are allocated a public housing unit. Many people are left with no choice. Many people have to live in subdivided flats because housing supply could not address their needs. The budget said that the government has identified 3.5 hectares of land for public housing to accommodate 300,000 units in the next 10 years, but only 1/3 will be completed within the next 5 years. The rest would only be completed after 10 years. So this cannot alleviate the short-term needs. And this figure is only an estimate based on the track record of the government. We often saw delays in public housing development. According to the Hong Kong Foundation, over the past 10 years, housing production was 100,000 less than the original projection, or equivalent to 13 Choi Hong estates. Grassroots as well as the middle class have suffered as a result. And in light of the pandemic, the property market seems to have declined. But for a new property in Yuen Long, the price is still as much as $18,000 per square foot. So Vice Premier Han Zheng and Officer Xiao Baolong said that we must tackle the issue of SDUs, and we must bid farewell to SDUs and cage housing. So would the government officials ignore the calls of the central government? Apart from allocating more resources, the government should remove barriers in terms of policies to speed up housing production. Recently, candidate for chief executive John Lee has paid a lot of attention to this issue, and based under a results-oriented approach, public housing or housing production would be sped up. We hope the new term of government can achieve improvements in housing so that people can improve their lives. And we need to pay more attention to allowing the vulnerable in our society to share the fruits of development, and no one should be forgotten or left behind by the government. Every kid should have a desk to write on. So as a father, this is my humble request on the next term government. Thank you.
Mr. Lee, Mr. President, when the Financial Secretary consulted our views in relation to his budget, the fifth wave wasn't raging, but then all out of a sudden it became almost out of control. So the administration had to adopt the strictest social distancing measures, hitting all sectors, all industries. The community was hurt severely. The wave was strong and quick. The FS reacted swiftly. On the 23rd of February, the budget speech was delivered at different levels on different fronts. We knew that there were adjustments in the light of the pandemic, and some breakthroughs have been sort of proposed when compared with the past. A lot of resources have also been deployed to help the grassroots as well as the middle class. I think the response has been favorable. Now the epidemic is getting serious, and so we have got over $800 billion in terms of the public expenditure this year. I think this is in the right direction. The pandemic is severe, and if we are in a position to do so, we need to do that. And this is a good response to the aspirations and needs of all quarters of our community. We need to spend when we have to do so. This also helps to diversify our economy, to fight the virus. We have resources for this purpose. $60 billion have been set aside. More facilities, acquisition of rapid test kits, vaccines, and all sorts of equipment, etc. Also, the budget has also set its eyes on the future. We have a long-standing problems of lack of manpower in the healthcare sector. So there will be more money for healthcare manpower training. By having a multi-pronged approach, we would like to get back to normalcy. Yes, the budget has been using all available resources to fight the pandemic. In terms of poverty alleviation, we have seen some good ideas in response to some of our requests, like enhancing the consumption vouchers. This is good. And then for the elderly, for the disabled, they get an allowance equal to half a month's rate for the assistance. There have also been many relief measures like salary tax, business registration fees, the surcharge for sewage, etc. for the commercial sector. And then, of course, we have also got a very good proposal. That is, at most, you can claim $100,000 in relation to tax deduction for rental of domestic buildings. I think this is similar to interest payment for your mortgage loan. It may not have a very direct effect, but this is welcomed by the middle class, easing their pressure. And then for rental enforcement moratorium for tenants of specific sectors, this is a new idea. It doesn't come by easily. Again, this is to help those who have been hardest hit, hoping that we can give them some breathing space. Of course, during the period since the budget was delivered, there were many comments. On the day of the budget announcement, we reminded the FS that their proposal might have some knock-on effects, and we asked the administration to come up with measures to ease the concerns of the stakeholders. We are going to resume the second reading debate of this particular bill. I'm sure members will speak to the topic. I won't go into the details here. Now the budget has been delivered, and then the new term government will take office on the 1st of July. In other words, the budget will see us through the new term government as well. In other words, it is going to connect the two terms of government. I take this opportunity to ask the incumbent office holders as well as the newcomers to adopt policies that benefit the community. We have to learn from our experience. We have to admit our mistakes, and we have to improve upon ourselves. We have to fine-tune our existing policies. President, we have huge problems with our housing policies. The budget is supposed to provide resources to the policy address. Therefore, for this budget, we don't see a lot of information concerning housing policies. We've only got a small number of paragraphs on housing, like streamlining the development control measures, compressing the time, using new technologies, etc. But then housing is getting more and more serious. The waiting time for public housing is increasing all the time. The latest is 6 years, and this is the longest time since 1999. Longer and longer waiting time for public housing has generated a lot of grievance on the part of the community. So I will urge the new term government to be determined and to put in a lot of efforts to solve this problem. Other than increasing the plot ratio, having more land for housing as sentient, and amending the land resumption ordinance, among all sorts of measures, we must certainly try to shorten the time to make land available for housing so that we have a results-oriented philosophy. Mr. President, if we say that we want the waiting time to be 3 years, but in reality it is not 3 years, and if we want to bid farewell to subdivided units, in fact, this hasn't been adopted by the administration as a policy goal. So I don't think the community will have any sense of satisfaction, and the government and the people won't have confidence in the government. So for the FS and for the incoming term of government, I think you need to be innovative, you need to change, you need to have reforms so that we can reduce the waiting time to 3 years for public housing, and which can bid farewell to SDUs. Of course, we do have division of labor within the administration. For land policy, we have to go back to the long-term housing strategy. Yes, the direction is right, but time and again, we have said that to resolve the housing problem in Hong Kong, we have to change the methods of calculation in the long-term housing strategy. We should bid farewell to SDUs. We should help the young to get housing. We should also shorten the waiting time. The 3 points are important. Then we know how much we need, how much land we need to supply housing. And then this is what we call results-oriented. Mr. President, for this budget, other than the housing policy, which hasn't been given sufficient space, expediting urban renewal and providing more resources, again, not much has been said about that. Of course, I can appreciate the FS was more concerned about setting aside resources to fight the virus and to make sure that there will be an economic revival. The virus will leave us one day, but we're still faced with 2 important issues. First, aging of the population, aging of our building stock. Both are affecting Hong Kong, bordering us, and they are huge challenges. For the Urban Renewal Authority, for buildings having an age of over 40, we have got as many as 9,600. They are in disrepair, they don't have any owners, corporations, etc. I've been serving the community for decades, and I've been in touch with the tenants living in such buildings. Of course, the budget cannot address such deep-rooted problems, but still, in our debate, we have to remind the administration for housing, which is a long-standing problem, and for SDUs, etc., our people are still suffering. So I will urge the FS and other directors of bureaus, as well as the incoming team, to show us the determination and make sure that our land and housing policies will see some breakthrough so that the community can have some hope and we can really have a results-oriented philosophy of governance. Yes, this is the last budget of this term government, but the FS isn't acting like a watch government. It shows that the government is willing to use the resources available to fight the virus, and there is also a sort of a perspective about our long-term development. So it means that we can be on the right track back to healthy development, and I think it will lay the groundwork for resolving the deep-rooted issues. So I hope the government will be active in promoting the policies so that we can resolve the conflicts and confrontations that are deep-rooted in our community. So I spoke in support of the bill. Mr. Horace Jack, Mr. President, for the budget, well, $170 billion have been set aside as counter-cyclical measures to fight the virus, to relieve the hardship of the people, and to revive the economy. Well, I think we all know that we have had 5 waves of the virus. The economy is in a bad shape. In fact, we are plagued. We are bordered by lots of difficulties. Against such a background, it is not an easy task to prepare this budget. All in all, I would say that this budget is pragmatic and it is people-oriented, and it tries to seek progress steadily. Well, I think what we need to do is to have such a budget so that we can consolidate our strength. Well, we have got some policies here. They are counter-cyclical, and that would give, and it would rejuvenate the economy. I know it also sets its eyes on the future development. It helps to make the society more resilient. The government is providing policy support, providing resources, and of course there will be more opportunities for development in the GBA, and we're going to act in accordance with the 14th five-year plan. I think the budget has laid a very good groundwork for the right direction of our future development. President, I want to say a few words on our fight against the virus. This is, of course, the overriding mission for us. In order to fight the pandemic, $65.7 billion will be spent on the construction of facilities, buying of the red kits, enhancing the environmental hygiene, etc. Well, I think in this way, we are given a lot of help in our fight against the virus. It shows that the government takes the matter seriously, and it is right because the government is responsible for public health. I think we have learned a hard lesson in the 5th wave of the pandemic. I think we have to be prepared for another wave of outbreak. Otherwise, we'll be caught by surprise. And then in terms of relieving the people's hardship, the administration is going to provide a lot of resources to help the people fight the virus. In addition, we have got quite a large number of one-off measures to help the people and enterprises to tide over the rainy days. As it has been pointed out by Sterling, we have got tax reductions for salaries tax, raise concession, electricity account subsidies, and also an allowance for the CSSA recipients, OH allowance recipients, and working family allowance recipients. I think this is a response to our aspirations that will sort of ease the worries of the people. But then the public housing tenants don't get any exemption of rental payment as we have suggested. I think this is a bit disappointing. But still, we are glad to see that for many years we have been fighting for tax deduction for domestic rental expenses. Eventually, it has been taken on board by the government. I think this is good. It means that our heavy rental burden can be eased. It has our full support. And then for the electronic consumption vouchers, we welcome the FS second round of consumption vouchers of $10,000. It can go some way to ease our pressure for meeting our daily needs. And in addition, for the retail industry, for the catering industry, I'm sure the electronic consumption vouchers will have a stimulating effect, and it will help with our economic development. At the same time, it will also promote the development of electronic payment in Hong Kong. I would like to turn to something else, and that's about the Future Fund. In order to tie in with the development opportunities of the 14th five-year plan, we have got 5 industries that we should focus on. The budget has got specific measures. Now, for the Future Fund, I know that $10 billion will be set aside. $5 billion will be spent on the Innovation and Technology Strategic Fund so that we can identify enterprises that will contribute to our development. Another $5 billion will be spent on the GBA investment fund so that we can focus on the investment opportunities in the GBA. It is going to add momentum to our opportunities there. It will also bring a lot of revenue. I'm sure such will go a long way to promote our innovation technology industries, and it will be very meaningful in relation to our integration with the rest of the GBA. For startups, I know that they get subsidies in terms of rental, in terms of other funding schemes. We've also got matching grants. But then for our local unicorns, when they leave the stage of being a startup, they no longer get any input from the government. The enterprise may get listed, the government may expand, and they no longer get any help from the government. By having this new fund, I hope the government can provide more help to such enterprises. At appropriate junctures, I think we should help them financially. Otherwise, other sovereign funds will take the opportunity, and then such enterprises will go elsewhere. And we need to make sure that core enterprises, in particular I&T enterprises like Huawei, will be attracted to come to Hong Kong. And then enterprises upstream and downstream in the GBA will also come to Hong Kong. This will diversify our economic structure. It will also help the GBA core industries to expand the international market, and this will bring about a win-win situation for us. Finally, I would like to talk about the digital economy. I think that is the way forward, and in the budget, there will be a digital economy development committee so as to expedite our development. Against the background of the pandemic, I think digitalization has been sort of highlighted as the way forward. So by having such a committee, I really have a lot of expectation. I hope there will be some concrete goals, and then we can become a smart city. I look forward to some very specific recommendations, a roadmap, a timetable, and there should be regular reviews of the progress, and there should be cooperation and coordination among different industries. I hope this won't just become a talk shop. Of course, as early as a decade ago, there was this idea of having e-government. So that marks our transformation, and the government has been updating its digitalization goals. In 2017 and lately, we have got a roadmap for Hong Kong as a smart city. We have also got 2.0 smart city. Instead of just being a e-government, we have now aimed at having a smart government. But I think we're still lagging behind. We're just having online submission of forms, using emails to deal with administrative tasks. So instead of abandoning the paper copies, I think we need to go for using big data and AI, etc. So I think we need to monitor the data, collect the data, make use of big data and AI so as to carry out more analysis. In this way, we can fine-tune the government's efficiency in dealing with livelihood issues. However, the government is still aiming at the infrastructure of a digital economy. I think the government has yet to make good use of the data. We are still a far cry from making good use of AI. I hope the government will do more. So I spoke. Thank you.
Tommy Joe next. Thank you, Chairman. I speak in support of the 2022 Appropriation Bill's second reading. I highly support the budget. Under the pandemic, various industries have been dealt an unprecedented blow. The catering industry is really in deep water. Our operating environment is very tough, and the budget, however, proposes a series of measures to benefit the sector and also offer all kinds of concessions in rates, for example, business registration fees, sewage, water bills, and so forth. The amount of those concessions may not seem a lot, but together they actually are good relief, and we appreciate the support. And the latest budget also, upon request from the Liberal Party, distributed $10,000 in consumption voucher to the public. We welcome that. Last time consumption voucher was distributed, there was much economic benefits. As a result, the retail sector from August to December last year, that is when the consumption voucher was distributed for the first time, rose per capita on a yearly basis by 8.8% compared to the average increase in January to July last year of 7.6% is much higher. So I believe that the latest consumption voucher will continue to stimulate consumption and help invigorate our economic recovery. We all know that rents and wages have been the bulk of expenses of SMEs. During the difficult period of the pandemic, many conscientious landlords have agreed to cut rents to ride out the tough times with the tenants. But there's also cases where some tenants actually were given warning notices, and had their water supplies cut off because they had not been paying the rent in time. 2 years ago, the Liberal Party had recommended to the government to legislate to offer protection for tenants, business tenants. The 2+2 proposal means that the government and the landlords will share the rental expenses, and eligible tenants could have 2 months of their rents been paid for, and also there can be 2 months of rent waivers altogether, so support for 4 months of rents. SMEs in the catering industry can have breathing space with the support in the budget. I'm very pleased to see that the government finally came up with the temporary protection measures for business tenants and offered help to the tenants. In 2019, the COVID-19 pandemic actually had the relevant bill implemented, and the government this time has not carried out with the 2+2 rent waiver, but asked the landlords to suspend chasing tenants for rents. I hope that the government can ultimately implement 2+2 proposal. By then, I think the landlords' responses and reaction may far outweigh their latest reactions. So this is a test of the Financial Secretary to actually counter the obstacles. In China, there was also a proposal to exempt tenants from paying rents forcing or for prohibiting landlords from charging 1 month's rent. So I hope that the government can consider the 2+2 proposal again. Due to the impact of Cap 999 in the pandemic, the latest arrangement offering protection for business tenants does give our catering sector a breathing space. At least tenants will not have to have their lease terminated because of default on rent payment. And I understand that this is a controversial topic because big and small landlords may still need to rely on the rent to pay back their mortgages. For the benefits of the landlords and tenants, the government and the secretary have all been listening to the views of various sectors all along and trying to optimize their proposal so that landlords can be allowed to delay paying their rates. And for landlords relying on rents to make ends meet, they can also be entitled to other concessions. The government has tried to minimize the impact on landlords and tried to strike a balance between looking after the interests of landlords and tenants. And the government has also adopted our proposal to broaden the scope of the latest measure to cover more premises in the catering sector, and that amounts to recognition of our work. Rents, wages under the pandemic are a major burden for operators of restaurants. So we support the government's move to launch the latest round of ESS. So they launched the 2022 ESS in time. It provides timely help for the sector because it reduces our expenditure in wages and also increases the financial secretary's move to help minimize the impact of the rent. And the sector affected by the pandemic, well, people might think that, suspension of chasing tenants for rents, actually, together with this latest measure, can help the catering sector survive. Now that dining in the evening is allowed, so all those measures have to put together are bringing benefits to the sector. For financing needs of SMCs, since the launch of the financing scheme for SMEs, that actually allows for the catering sector to have extra financial support. The guarantee scheme, the financing scheme for the SMEs actually came out of suggestion by the Liberal Party, and we managed to get the latest scheme implemented. The SME financing guarantee scheme actually has proved useful, and also the guarantee product proposal will be extended to end of June, and also the special 100% guarantee product, optimization of loans, allowing each enterprises to borrow up to 27 months of the wages from 18 months, and the limit be increased to $9 million. Repayment period extended to 10 years from 8 years. Those moves, and also together with the principal payment holiday scheme, all these are moves to help the sector struggling under the pandemic. And many enterprises do need loans to ride out the storm. So to the SMEs, this is something positive, and to help them find the money they need. Because with the 100% guarantee approach, the government would be actually trying to shoulder the cost of bad debts. But I'm very pleased that the Financial Secretary is offering help to the sector. I'm confident that with the help of the government, when the time comes for them to pay taxes, they will return all the money borrowed from the government. On the whole, for the budget, I'm very satisfied with it. I, together with the Liberal Party, support the 2022 Appropriation Bill. and be passed at the second reading stage. On behalf, I'd like to use the remaining time to, for all the mainland healthcare workers coming to Hong Kong and also the frontline healthcare workers in Hong Kong, I want to express to them my sincere gratitude and please that I hope the public can support the government's fight against the pandemic. Next one is Frankie Yik. Chairman, Hong Kong is still under the impact of the pandemic. The Liberal Party welcomes the Financial Secretary's budget, which on the basis of concessions and also to allow for all sorts of concessions and waivers to the public and also to extend the bank's pre-approved payment scheme, principal payment scheme, and also financing guarantee scheme. Now more people have gone out and make purchases, but still the pandemic over the past 2 years have dealt a serious blow to various sectors. I hope that on the relief measures like the principal payment holiday scheme and the concessions of various fees can be extended to the end of the year so enterprises have more breathing space and recover. Besides the other all the fiscal support measures, the Liberal Party likes to thank the government for its speedy implementation of Anti-Epidemic Fund 6.0 so that for businesses which cannot operate under the pandemic and those who are temporarily unemployed can get temporary relief, and also welcome the ESS scheme to support the employers in paying their staff so that there won't be any new wave of unemployment. Sure, there are still groups which need support which have actually fallen through the cracks and are not given the support they need, so the government should pay attention to those neglected groups. And now with the social distancing rules and class suspension and working from home, for example, have led to a drastic decline in the number of passengers on board public transportation. Even though the government for buses, ferries, trams have provided a one-off reimbursable subsidy, but they amount to not much. Particularly, all the costs have not dropped at all in their operations. So now in the face of rising gasoline prices, and also the preparation of anti-pandemic supplies, even though employers can apply for ESS, but the scheme only covers staff with MPF accounts, and there's a ceiling on how many staff they can apply for the subsidy for. Because, and also some centers may hire more older staff aged above 65 or like the green minibus operating companies, and many of these drivers hired by them do not have the MPF accounts, and many public transport operators are in a dire situation. In order to provide stable public transportation service, even when passengers' numbers have sharply declined, they still need to provide their service. So for the public transportation operators who are suffering huge losses, the government should step up its support and help for them. And for drivers of red minibuses or taxi drivers, unless they have MPF accounts, they are only entitled to gas subsidy. But now, liquefied gas price on a per liter basis have risen to $6, up from $3 before. So the government subsidy is not enough to help them offset the hefty rise in gas prices. Prices now are paying more in gas expenditures. So I hope that the government can consider providing more subsidy to these drivers. Now, after the pandemic, for the cross-boundary ferry and tour coaches, should they resume their services, they will need to be re-maintained and repaired, and also often training to new staff after stopping the service for 2 years. Many operators of these buses have to survive on loans, so they don't really have much cash to prepare for resuming their services. The Liberal Party hopes the government can, for these operators, provide relaunch fund so that before the cross-boundary service is resumed, make sure that they have adequate training and well-repaired buses to provide the service, and also good training for their staff. In aviation, Liberal Party welcomes the budget proposal to develop the airport city and provide and promote air cargo. But we still need to resolve the bottleneck issue in the current situation. In Hong Kong, most of the cargo passing through Hong Kong is related to China. All along, this cargo relies on transportation of the cargo through road networks. But since March 14 this year, the mainland actually reduced the capacity for road shipment of cargo. And so the cargo volume dropped and the operating and transportation costs sharply rose. Some businesses have directly exported goods from the mainland instead of passing through Hong Kong. In Wong Kong Hong border checkpoint, there's a new arrangement put in place already. That is, should the same move be implemented in other ports, then the logistics and aviation industries in Hong Kong will be seriously undermined. So we must try to get approval from the mainland government to ensure that cargo can be transported by road to Hong Kong before they're exported, so that Hong Kong can remain an aviation and maritime logistics hub. 80% of the goods worldwide are shipped to various destinations, including its high-value shipping services are in huge demand now. Guangzhou, Shenzhen have developed high-end shipping industry, and they've set out various plans and measures to enhance their services in order to increase Hong Kong's competitiveness and status as a maritime center. Liberal Party, we should suggest that we should provide actually a tax incentive to the sector. In order to further expand Hong Kong's maritime industry, Hong Kong can consider provide for local traders further tax concessions so that more traders would set up bases in Hong Kong to meet the needs and increase the needs for shipping service and shipment services. And there's also the plan in the budget to develop the third round of STW. We need to have a actually single trade window set up with Southeast Asia. The second round of single trade window won't be launched till next year, so we don't know when the third round of single trade window will be launched. Last year, the mainland and Singapore established their single trade window. Hong Kong is lagging behind, far behind. So I hope that the government can speedily launch the implementation of single trade window and seize the opportunity offered by RCEP. Now, with the popularization of e-vehicles around the world, to encourage more drivers to switch to electric vehicles, the Liberal Party agrees that the government should provide more e-charging facilities. The government's plan to change LPG stations and gas stations, convert them into charging facilities. Let me remind the departments, because the 12 designated gas stations have seen long queues by minibuses and taxis. So in implementing or before they convert any stations, they must consult the sector first to avoid any happenings of unpleasant events. You know, public transportation is actually very important, and we see all sorts of modes of public transportation on the road. It's a good direction, right direction to go for more e-vehicles, but we need to see when it's feasible. And there is also funding requirement for the creation of charging facilities for e-vehicles. So we need to have a vision, but also the support for having more e-vehicles. Now, the economy has yet to recover, and yet some sectors have seen labor shortages, particularly shortages of skilled laborers. The Liberal Party hopes that the government can increase resources in enhancing vocational education to meet the market needs. Hong Kong's education system all along has neglected engineering and technology subjects. So we have a shortage of technical staff, like in the areas of aviation, car repair, shipping, and so forth. All these sectors are indispensable. So the government should increase the STEM education and promote vocational education to ease the shortage of talents and also mismatch of talents. Chairman, I just spoke. Thank you.
主席，
Ms. Yuen Seong. President, the impacts of COVID on the economy has been much discussed. As for the recovery initiatives in the budget, they have been targeted towards the tourism industry, etc. Since Hong Kong is yet to achieve zero infections, even though this is our goal, the borders are yet to reopen, and that would create concerns about Hong Kong's long-term future. We hope that the government would be financially prepared and be flexible with their policies in order to deal with all possible scenarios. In delivering the budget this year, the financial secretary has revised the surplus to $18.9 billion, and by the end of the third quarter, the reserves will grow. Last year, the estimate was a deficit of $101.6 billion and reserves of $801 billion. The difference were $100 and $140 billion respectively. And for 2021 financial, the reserves will grow to $461 billion, or about 30%. The majority were spent on welfare, education, and health. They made up 58%. The expenditure on healthcare went up the most, or more than 100, or about 100%. We understand the rise in expenditure in different areas, but given the deficit forecast, the FS expects the reserves to fall below $900 billion, or to be exact, $890.3 billion, or equivalent to 13 months of government expenditure. I wouldn't say the FS made a mistake, but if there are discrepancies, the government should review our budget to ensure that it is accurate and whether our policies could be affected. Given the impacts of COVID-19, the grassroots and SMEs all face different extents of pressure financially, and we are happy to see that the budget has announced the second round of the consumption vouchers, or $10,000 per person. This is very helpful to many people. We see that grocery prices at places like supermarkets have multiplied, and that means the consumption vouchers would lose their value if prices are going up at the same time. So we hope the government can provide some oversight in terms of the conditions of the consumption vouchers so that the public can actually benefit. The government has continued to provide reductions in profit tax and salary tax, and for SMEs, apart from reductions in profit tax and the rates of non-residential premises, the SME financing guarantee scheme has been optimized, and tax reductions for residential premises have been introduced, and it was something proposed by us a few years ago. At that time, the financial secretary said it could not be implemented due to technical constraints, so we are happy to see its introduction this time. This measure will relieve the taxpayers of their burden in renting domestic properties, and this would benefit the grassroots. Meanwhile, for certain middle-income individuals, some of them are renting a bigger unit for their family, and they have rented out their own smaller units. They hope that they can benefit from the tax deduction as well. This is something I have conveyed to the FS earlier. So for people who own a smaller unit while renting a bigger unit, they should be able to benefit as well. The borders are yet to reopen, and this certainly cause for concern. In past budgets, for the legal profession, the GBA mediation working group set up last year established the accreditation standards for GBA mediators as well as best practice, and they were implemented at the end of last year. The government has been promoting the provision of services by legal practitioners in the Bay Area. For example, those who practice on the GBA, partnership firms, cooperation initiatives, etc. And the I&T landscape has been competitive globally, and the technical standards have been established for the NFTs. They have been very popular on the market. The government also set up a steering committee on a digital economy, which was a visionary move and showed the government's commitment. The government should develop our digital economy with a vision such as the metaverse, blockchain, or NFTs. That way, developments could be made under these areas, and that would benefit people's livelihood as well. So the government should keep abreast with the latest technological developments. Under the budget, $600 million would be earmarked in the next 3 years for a comprehensive digital audit, and this would streamline the use of digital resources by the government. Over the past years, we saw that the government has pursued work in these areas. Recently, LegCo discussed how we can adopt or embrace technology in the legal area. Under the ITB, the government should make more use of OGO on the development of cloud computing, blockchain, etc., and an integrated solution should be formulated to benefit different departments. The Northern Metropolis is one of Hong Kong's key land development strategies. The government has adopted an infrastructure-led approach by expanding its railway network and facilitating district development. The government should continue to strike a balance between infrastructure and manpower planning. We need enough manpower to realize these projects. The Northern Metropolis represents a huge opportunity. If we do not have the right manpower resources, the Northern Metropolis development could be impeded. So in the coming year, the government should give us a plan and timeline and the government should support the Northern Metropolis strategy by streamlining the manpower resources. The government earmarked some $1.26 billion for the tourism sector to aid their revival. $600 million have been earmarked for an incentive scheme on local heritage tours. And the government should put more resources on the cruise to nowhere itineraries. The New People's Party have suggested how these cruise to nowhere itineraries can aid our recovery, and how the anti-epidemic control measures can play a role as well. The government's counter-cyclical measures have benefited the livelihood of the people and helped recover our economy, and these have facilitated the potential recovery of our borders. Next, Mr. Sunny Tan. President, I speak in support of the Appropriation Bill 2022. In January, and together with election committee subsector members of the sector, we filed a petition letter to the Financial Secretary. We submitted 12 proposals. We would like to thank the FS for listening to us. These include the handout, the $10,000 cash handout across 2 phases, extending the application period for the special 100% guarantee scheme, and more than $170 billion worth of counter-cyclical measures were rolled out, and I think the relief is much needed. Our nation has provided robust backing to Hong Kong, and they have paid a lot of attention to the welfare of the people in the form of the GBA developments, the 14th Five-Year Plan, and the Xianhai Plan. Our nation has always had Hong Kong on their mind, and this has provided a lot of opportunities for us. The budget has proposed numerous measures to support the 14th Five-Year Plan and providing support to our industries, including the $5 billion GBA investment fund, and to facilitate mutual access and connectivity between the markets. Some $130 million have been earmarked to the Trade Development Council to help enterprises develop mainland markets. As a member representing the textile industry, I have encouraged the industry to embrace the external and internal opportunities. The pace of economic recovery of our nation has outpaced other countries. Our country's GDP will reach 11.4 trillion, and consumption remains strong, and many enterprises have developed healthily. So Hong Kong enterprises should grasp such opportunities. But simply allocating funds for mainland enterprise support schemes might not be enough. We should help them enter the mainland market, and we should focus on boosting export credit for Hong Kong enterprises on the mainland market. Export credit or insurance has always been a main challenge, and the HKECIC's export credit arrangement has been refined. A 12-month export credit guarantees program was rolled out to offer a guarantee of up to 70% of the export financing, subject to a limit of $50 million. I welcome this move. The new program will help reassure SMEs and help them integrate into the national development plans. The FS can do more for the industry by further refining the ECIC services. For instance, by facilitating strategic cooperation between ECIC and their counterpart on the mainland, and together with banks and insurance companies on the mainland, more collaboration could be carried out. Greater export credit commitments could be provided so that more companies can benefit, and we can remove their or help alleviate their difficulties with export credit. The Hong Kong has been earmarked for 8 roles, and Hong Kong is positioned as an international I&T and export center. The budget has offered many initiatives under innovation and technology. and reindustrialization would be pursued. The Innovation and Technology Fund would be streamlined by increasing the commitment to $440 billion. And under the startup program, the commitment for each university will increase to $16 million, and commercialization of I&T research would be realized, and I support all these initiatives. I stress that reindustrialization is not just about the high value-added industries and smart production. We should better support the textile and clothing trades, even though these products aren't manufactured in Hong Kong. The R&D, design, and taxation are all based in Hong Kong. So this is a holistic production chain, and we must respect every part of the chain. The HRTA has achieved very positive results in R&D of textile and clothing, but the market share is often not up to scratch. The government should offer incentive programs to encourage R&D institutes in Hong Kong to realize their outcome in Hong Kong. So after government restructuring, the revamped Innovation and Industry Bureau can realize reindustrialization under the leadership of Mr. John Lee. In terms of external trade, the budget has offered 50% concessions to commercial principals to encourage more maritime companies to set up camp in Hong Kong. And the budget also talked about the need for Hong Kong to join RCEP as soon as possible, and I look forward to good news. Hong Kong should also join the CPTT, and more free trade agreements should be signed with other economies, and to sign more comprehensive avoidance of double taxation agreements. External trade should be boosted, and we must gear ourselves for a recovery. The nation has provided solid backing for Hong Kong. For the next term government, under the leadership of Mr. John Lee, they should work with the different industries by rolling out short, medium, and long-term measures to help Hong Kong integrate itself into the national development plans. And Hong Kong's strengths could complement the needs of the mainland. And with the backing of the nation, Hong Kong can write a glorious new chapter under one country, two systems. I hope COVID would recede soon, and that people's lives could resume and our economy could recover as well. That way we can have quarantine-free travel between the mainland, and the government should continue to listen to the needs of the people by rolling out alleviation measures. Thank you very much. I speak in support of the Appropriation Bill 2022.
Dr. Kennedy Wong, Mr. President, for this budget, overall speaking, it is a proactive budget and it is for the benefit of the community. It has my support. On behalf of the import and export sector, I would like to make 4 comments and suggestions. The first is about traditional Chinese medicine. The virus or the pandemic is easing and the death rate is lowering. I think the TCM has contributed to this easing. The DAB has always been asking for a greater role to be given to TCM in the fight against the virus. The government has taken on board our views. I think if we make better use and greater use of TCM, we can reduce the death rate, reduce the number of serious cases, and lower the infection rate. I hope the administration, the FS, will put in more resources to acquire more TCM. And in terms of policy, please make sure that you integrate Western medicine and TCM so that we aim at results for the better protection of public health. At the Q&A session hosted by the CE, I have already asked the administration to make sure that TCM will be given a bigger role. The chief executive also gave a favorable reply. But then when we look at the amount of resources set aside, $20 billion goes to the FCB for tests, $6 billion for vaccines, $7 billion for antivirus equipment, etc. But what about acquisition and use of TCM? I think the ratio is very low. Well, in this fifth wave, I think many citizens welcome the use of TCM. So TCM will see a greater demand. So the government should advocate the R&D of TCM, and the government should also promote a greater role for the TCM in both the public as well as the private sectors. Digitalization is the trend for the future. And in fact, this is also a national policy as well. And this is a strategic choice for our motherland as well. For Guangdong in 2020, for the digital economy, it has an added value of $5 trillion, accounting for a huge proportion of its GDP. I think it is almost half of the GDP of Guangdong. For us to become an international innovation and technology center, if we want to become a core city of GBA, in terms of the national strategy of our motherland, which goes after digitalization, we cannot shirk our responsibility. Time and again, I've said that we need to set up an official agency to deal with this issue. The FS has responded. There will be a Digital Economy Development Committee. I welcome such a proposal. I hope that upon the establishment of such a committee, we can sort of dovetail the national policies, and then we can look at the overall national policy. And we have to set up a government big data center, and we have to break down the barriers among departments, and we must have full digitalization of government business. The government should take the lead so that we have more infrastructure for digital economy. The telecommunications operators should be given help to have the 5G network so that we can be truly having Internet of Things. We should cooperate with Guangdong so that we can have cooperation in the digital economy, and we can also set up the digital economic circle in the GBA. I have also been told that for the government's help given to the I&T sector as well as universities, a lot of funding has been given, but then the funding cannot cross the boundary, and we cannot have it applied to cooperation projects between Hong Kong and mainland enterprises. I hope the government will deregulate so that there will be flexibility, there will be relaxation in relation to the movement of funding so that we can promote the innovation technology sector. And then the TDC will get more than $100 million in the coming 3 years so as to help Hong Kong explore the mainland market. Of course, we have already got something similar. We do welcome additional funding, but then we want to have big data and we want to be precise in our governance. Currently, for the GBA, we have got 9 GBA cities, but the government hasn't got statistics in relation to the number of enterprises or businessmen working there. We've only got piecemeal information. Now, we're going to spend a lot of money. If we don't get results, it will be regrettable. I hope the government can do the following. We must have a Economic and Trade Office in all the 9 GBA cities. So that through different channels, we know about the people, that is our businessmen working there, so that we know about the trends. And then there should be a digital economy fund, and then we can explore the opportunities offered by e-commerce. Finally, regarding research, for us to become an international trading center, other than the GBA as well as the rest of the mainland, we have to look at other markets as well. We need to explore and exploit the overseas markets. For the RCEP, the government has spent little space on this question of visa. I know we are in the process of applying for membership. I know that when RCEP comes into being, and within 18 months, then we'll get the membership application details. But I think we still have to be very concerned about this. We have to look at the larger landscape. I think the external environment is worsening. Protectionism is rearing its head, and so to me, I think we'll be getting more and more difficult to join the major trade agreements. So I think we need to ask the Central People's Government to help so as to step up the lobbying work so that Hong Kong can become a member of RCEP as soon as possible. So I spoke in support of the bill. Mr. Gary Chen. Thank you, Mr. President. Well, the community of Hong Kong has been bothered by the virus. Our daily life, our economy have been badly affected. We cannot open our boundaries to the mainland, and we cannot resume normal relationship with the rest of the world in terms of trading, etc. And we have a very gloomy mood in the society. The administration has been waiving the fees and charges, introducing the consumption vouchers, deducting taxes, etc. They are welcome. And then profits tax has been reduced, and then the business registration fees has been lowered, etc. So the budget of the FS is a response to the current status. It helps to revive our economy. It is also helping us to take the opportunities of the 14th five-year plan. It should have our support. For many decades, Hong Kong has been emphasizing one point. We need to aim at prosperity and stability. But then for the past few years, President, we have seen changes in the external environment. Can we simply focus on prosperity at the cost of everything else, or should we aim at stability first? Without stability, it will be difficult to have prosperity. Our nation has opened up for 40 years, and I think we can learn from the experience. So our motherland has been relying on stability to prosper. I think Hong Kong would not be an exception to this rule. For the past 2 or 3 years, President, there was a lot of turmoil in our society. Foreign forces were trying to introduce a color revolution in Hong Kong, hoping that Hong Kong can be used as a base to suppress the development of our motherland. They tried to stir up trouble in Hong Kong so as to jeopardize the national security of our motherland. Before we had the national security law, Hong Kong was an unguarded city. With that law in place, things have calmed down. But does it mean that with the national security law and everything will be fine? Well, I think we have to understand that it is mainly aimed at the black-clad rioters as well as the terrorists. And we are looking at manipulating elections and jeopardizing the infrastructural projects. But what about financial security? when we look at this issue, I don't think we should just look at it from the narrow perspective of security. Well, in fact, prevention of virus is also important in terms of security and safety. Well, it will affect our economic stability, it will affect our livelihood. So as an IFC, we need to take it seriously when it comes to financial security. Well, when we look at our history, we knew that there were foreign forces trying to jeopardize our financial security to achieve ulterior motives. The Asian financial crisis was a very outstanding example. And in fact, Hong Kong is an important window for foreign capital to go into the mainland. And having financial security here will be important for our motherland. Our financial services industry is one of the 4 pillar industries, and it affects the livelihood of many citizens. And financial security will also affect the assets and properties of our people. So we have to make sure that we can achieve financial security. Otherwise, there will be people trying to jeopardize our financial stability so as to bring havoc to our motherland. So I think the FS must consider this. That is, we have to ensure our financial security. Financial is not a term that appears in our NSL. Yes, we do talk about having rules and regulations that regulate our financial services market, but I don't think it has given any sort of consideration to national security. So I'm afraid our financial stability is not being safeguarded with national security in mind. So when the new term government is to consider the legislation of Article 23 of the Basic Law, financial security should be given consideration. FS, I hope you will also consider this point. Of course, for us to fine-tune the systems, we can't just set the eyes on the traditional elements. We have to be up to date. Just now, members talked about NFTs and encrypted sort of coins, and also metaverse, etc. I think in such transactions, we have to make sure that the interests of our citizens will not be affected. We have to make sure that the security of our financial system and that of the motherland will not be affected, and there won't be any money laundering that can be realized. I've been talking about security and safety in my speech, and in the past 2 years, I think I have to talk about the disciplined services who have done a lot in upholding our safety. They face a lot of challenges. For their great structural review, it was discussed by the Legislative Council, and we have endorsed the proposal to enhance their pay and other employment conditions. For us to help the disciplined services, as a chairman of the security panel of the LegCo, I think we need to enhance their working conditions as well as their equipment. Former members went with me to their smart prison. I think it was a system developed locally. With this, it means that we can ease the pressure on manpower. We could also reduce their wear and their sort of we can prevent them from getting burnt out. But where does the money come from? My understanding is that the CSD tried to sort of make savings on different fronts so as to get money to spend on the development of the smart prison. For the CSD, if they get more money from the government, then the pressure can be eased, and we can also get more new recruits to join the department. So wider application of technology can help the discipline services in their daily work. I think this is the direction we need to adopt. I hope the FS will also deploy more resources of such a nature. Now we have got a police newsletter called the Police Beat. I think there was a police officer who had the skills of operating unmanned drones, and he used this skill to help in search and rescue operations. He used this skill to locate missing hikers. In other words, if we can use new technology in the work of the discipline services, it will benefit the community at large. Unfortunately, for existing officers of the discipline services, if they would like to deploy new technologies, I think the departments have to dip into their own pockets. I hope in the future there will be more resources for the discipline services so that they can use more new technology, and it applies not just to the discipline services. Throughout the government, if we can have more information technology, then it will provide better service to the community, making life easier. For the immigration department, there is a system that is a good example of using technology to facilitate enterprises as well as citizens. Thank you. So I spoke.
Jovi Chen. Thank you, Chairman. The May 4th Youth Festival is approaching. On the occasion, I'd like to reserve my time on the second reading on the Appropriation Bill on youth work. The budget does mention about youth work, and the Financial Secretary mentioned that we need to have balanced economic development. Many young people cannot utilize their talents, and the Financial Secretary pointed out the exact problem. The new generation of young people with tertiary education compared to older graduates, what they're making now is lower in terms of salary. That means our economic structure and development fail to provide quality posts for young people. The Financial Secretary did reflect the reality facing young people today. The chance for upward mobility compared to the previous generations now is really much less. The budget talks about innovation in technology sectors, creative industries which could provide posts for young people, and promotion of vocational education could also give more chances to young people and give them more choices. But let me point out that young people are facing issues that have not been addressed by the budget. So I'd like to use my remaining 8 minutes to talk about the problems facing young people now. The first, a really big issue for young people now is that they are incurring huge debts even before they graduate. Not all young people can get into government-funded universities. Some had to get into associate degree or private universities, and therefore they need to borrow money or even study and work at the same time. After finishing associate degree and the degree courses, they will have incurred debts of more than $300,000. The average salary for university graduates is about $12,000 to $14,000. That means that many young people will need to spend more than 10 years before they can clear the debt. And by the time they're debt-free, they'll be in their middle age. So some people choose not to do a master's degree since they have a debt of more than $300 and they don't want to borrow another $140,000. And they worry about their future debt. So this is what the society needs to reflect on. Why is it that our young people cannot further their studies because of fear of future debts? They are the future pillars of our society. Why do they have to incur debts before graduating? The government spent more than $100 million, $100 billion every year on education. So are we giving resources to people who really need the support? We need to think of reducing the burden young people face. And by the time they graduate, another issue they face is employment. The budget mentions that there are actually constraints in our economic structures. Our economic structures are so uniform. People mainly make huge profits from speculating on stocks and properties. But for young people who want to develop their interests, who don't want to be speculative, they don't see any way out. They don't see any way they can means through which they can make good money. So we need to optimize our economy to diversify economy and create more posts to young people. And we need to broaden horizon to include Greater Bay Area so that people can really create a business or work or even retire in the Greater Bay Area. The budget, the financial secretary is offering $130 million to help Hong Kong people explore business opportunities in the mainland. But if young people can have a part in that scheme, then they can also try to become business owners themselves. And now, quite a number of organizations propose that we should regulate the Greater Bay Employment Scheme. FTU supports this idea, particularly in the Greater Bay Area. With the diverse industries there, Hong Kong people can have more chances to find a post or job that suit their interests. In Shenzhen's culture park in Wakushing is termed or called the most creative hub in China. Young people can use just to spend very small amount of rents to realize their dreams. Culture and creative industries flourish in the hub. So we should actually learn from Shenzhen and give more opportunities to young people to exercise their skills and talents. So in Hong Kong, many young people also think that there's no way they can buy their own property. So the budget proposes that the ceiling for mortgage eligible properties to increase it from 10,000 to from 10,000 million to $8 million. So be realistic. Many young people, they cannot even afford 10% of the mortgage. So to help young people find their own home or have their own home, we need to explore other routes. FTU proposes that we should have a self-owned and speculative property market. We also need to help young people plan their future. How do young people regard their retirement lives? Do they feel protected when they retire? That's important. Chairman, don't think that retirement protection has nothing to do with young people. Proper retirement protection can give young people a free hand in developing their interests and careers, and don't need to be constrained by worries. In recent days, I've heard cries from various sectors, noises from various sectors for the government to suspend removing the offsetting mechanism in MPF. But we should actually stand up against those noises. We need to provide better protection, retirement protection for young people. We need to act now. We must, within this logical term, finish the bill on abolishing the offsetting mechanism in the MPF scheme. Hong Kong is a rich city. Many young people feel that from the time they study, work, get married to retirement, they have never shared any fruit of economic development. We should make good use of public money and provide relevant financial support and policy for them so that they can really exercise their talents, and we can nurture more talents and help them have upward mobility. And so that besides to help them, clear the way for them to develop their career. Chinese President Xi Jinping encouraged young people to achieve good results and to have flying colors in their endeavors. So we are responsible for providing a good runway for young people who want to run the race before them so that they would not actually fail our expectations, and Hong Kong would not actually be disappointing to them. Next one, Dr. Low Wai Kok. Chairman, under the severe pandemic, the Financial Secretary, Paul Chan, on February 23rd, through video conferencing, released the budget to us on the financial planning for the coming year introduced a number of measures. The budget actually adopted more than 50 proposals from BPA-HK, including the allocation of $54 billion to fight the pandemic, and also a series of measures in support of SMEs. The government has actually adopted a wide range of suggestions from the public. The 170 billion anti-cyclical measures is another encouraging move. In the fifth wave, we had more than 10,000 people infected, and during that critical time, the government was decisive in providing adequate supplies, and it built 8 temporary isolation facilities. Now, with the concerted effort of everyone, the pandemic has eased, and we hope that people can return to normal life with confidence. We can look forward to that with confidence. And the government, since late April, has relaxed some social distancing measures. And now, with the launch of the latest round of consumption vouchers, the economy is more prosperous than ever compared to several months ago. And we hope that BPA-HK hopes that the government can, again, always launch relief measures as needed and to help the public ride out the storm. The budget has launched quite a number of positive measures. I and the sector all along have urged the administration to promote infrastructure and enhance our capacity, and also to enhance the development of the engineering sector. The Financial Secretary has adopted our proposal. So they proposed including injecting $1.2 billion into the specialized fund, and also the launch of the $455 million infrastructure products, so as to support Hong Kong as a infrastructure financing hub, and also to make Hong Kong platform for financing of infrastructure projects. And this can help promote quality infrastructure works in Hong Kong. The budget also proposes allocating $1 billion to Construction Industry Council for staff training. So our party supports it. In the Northern Metropolis development, I hope that the government can, in an orderly and continuous way, step up staff planning deployment for the development of the area, so that there can be continuous employment for the sector. The engineering and the infrastructure sector have been actually hit by the dissolution or the disintegration in the supply chains, logistics chains. Several times I urged the government to review and help the sectors ride out the difficulties we face. I'm glad that the government has adopted our suggestions. On March 14th, it launched that it will extend the construction period of government contracts, and also the period in contractual relevant period in contractual contracts extended to 6 months. Also, the government on logistics sector, and also the rising cost of storage caused by the pandemic, the government is providing support and also offering concessions to help these sectors survive in this difficult time. Chairman, various sectors have been hard hit by the pandemic, the fifth wave. From January to March, the seasonally adjusted unemployment rate rose to 5.0%. The number of unemployed stood at 188,000 people. The unemployment rate in the construction sector rose to about 8%. On March 18th, on the 18th, the government launched a new round of ESS. But in the exclusion list, are constructors hiring more than 50 people. This is surprising news. I once wrote to the chief executive. I said that we need to protect the entire sector, and they adopted our opinion in the end. Quite a number of opinions from us, including abolishing the ceiling of a monthly wage of $30,000, And also, we can use the data, the actual number of staff, and in the last quarter of 2020 as the subsidized number or quota. And so all the contractors are no longer affected by the exclusion list, and they can actually have even as many as 1,000 staff. And even for main contractors on restricted list, they can apply for subsidy for a maximum of 100 staff. Also, self-employed people with MPF accounts and staff aged 65 or above are covered by the latest ESS. Finance Committee on April 22nd approved the the funding request to support the ESS so that the money can be dispersed to the employers in need. The budget also in fostering the development of smart cities and innovation technology has sought to provide more support to startups and create a 5 billion strategic INT venture fund, and also offer extra funds to support R&D. We support the development of research base in Greater Bay Area, and also the development of AI, so there can be more synergy. We also support the development of InnoLife Health Tech Hub, and also to attract more overseas R&D centers to be based in the Greater Bay Area. And due to the severe pandemic, quite a number of people cannot go to the mainland to settle their own or business matters. So we hope that the Hong Kong government can speed up its liaisons with the mainland and Macau government to, for example, implement a mutual e-certificate scheme and to have e-signatures approved so that there can be more mutual links and connections between Hong Kong and the neighboring regions. The government should try to reopen the border with Guangdong as soon as possible and announce the timetable whenever it's possible and also the roadmap ahead. Chairman, the BPHK thinks that the entire budget shows that the Financial Secretary has tried his utmost under the pandemic to provide relief for the public and to invigorate the economy and invest in the future despite the pandemic. And yet, the pandemic is still fluctuating. For various sectors, it has dealt a blow and also undermined people's livelihood. There are still a lot of unknowns ahead of us. The government must closely monitor the development of the pandemic and provide relief for the various business sectors and the public whenever needed. And this is also the last budget of the current SAR government. We are going to have a new chief executive. I believe that various sectors in Hong Kong do hope that the SAR government will have a smooth transition. And in allocating resources, developing economy, and improving people's livelihoods, I hope that the positive measures in those areas will be continued. And I hope that the new governance team of Hong Kong will continue to guide Hong Kong to invigorate the economy, resolve conflicts, and so that we can all join hands in together to welcome the rainbow after the pandemic. So Hong Kong will have a new chapter. Now, Chairman, I spoke in support of the Appropriation Bill 2022.
Mr. Ronak Chan. President, Mr. Paul Chan, the Financial Secretary, said in his delivery of the budget, said that the brown color represents soil, which is a nurturing element. But the fact is many industries have been hit hard by the pandemic. The budget must provide nutrients per se for enterprises and the public to tide over their challenges while nurturing new industries. And through financial commitments, Hong Kong can swiftly integrate itself into the national development plans and to plan for our economic future. Personally, I believe the budget has struck a balance between both. I'd like to focus on three areas. First of all, alleviating the hardships of the people and supporting the enterprises. The budget has allocated $67.5 billion in fighting COVID, in purchasing rapid antigen test kits and various supplies, building infrastructure, and $20 billion have been earmarked for the uses. But fighting COVID is not just about spending. The government must make use of support from the central government, and by working together with the society, the priority should be on the well-being of the people, and they must exhaust all means to achieve zero infections. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to calls for so-called sweeteners from the government, and the $10,000 consumption vouchers were the common wish of different parties. The first batch was handed out already, while the balance would be dispersed in the middle of the year. Despite the COVID pandemic, which affected consumption sentiments, the consumption vouchers can at least meet the basic needs of the public and relieve their hardships. SMEs have run into difficulties in light of COVID, and under the budget, the SME financing guarantee scheme and pre-approved principal payment holiday scheme would be extended. For the former, enterprises can enjoy a longer repayment period and higher loan ceiling under the special 100 guarantee product, while the payment holiday scheme will be extended to October this year. And these have answered the calls of the industries and myself and help relieve the burden on SMEs and retain jobs. The budget has prohibited landlords from recovering rents on the 39 specified types of premises. The rental enforcement moratorium is a good idea in principle, and many enterprises would benefit, but there are also calls that the mechanism should be dictated by the market, or that the government should urge the major landlords to reduce rent. Some landlords said such prohibition arrangement is against the spirit of the law, and in response, the FS made adjustments to the moratorium arrangement. The banking sector did not understand such move. They have been supporting the enterprises, and the government should exercise flexibility, and such arrangement would affect the legislative ground of the approach. I agree with the breakthroughs achieved in this budget on the payment of rates, and a three-tier system was introduced for residential premises, and for more valuable residential premises, higher rates would be charged. And as such, the landlords would benefit, and this can achieve wealth redistribution and relieve the burden on the government. Rates valuation is based on assessment. A three-tier progressive rates regime could lead to more objections from landlords, which would drive up administrative costs. The government should be well prepared for ahead of the implementation of the arrangement. I'd like to talk about reinforcing our financial muscles. The budget ascertained the importance of the financial sector in Hong Kong and address some of my views. A number of initiatives were offered to consolidate our status as an international financial hub, including promoting a wider use of fintech, expanding the mutual access schemes, developing or expanding the scope of offshore renminbi products, developing wealth and asset management, more quality investors and companies could be attracted to Hong Kong. For the in terms of expanding the products denominated in the renminbi, more retail investors could be attracted, and this is conducive to the wider use of renminbi. As for the retention of talent, more manpower training schemes have been rolled up for there is now more support of funding support on the training of talent, and to dovetail with the development of the GBA, there will be an extra $10 billion commitment, of which half would be spent on the GBA investment fund. The GBA will be a key driver going forward by complementing their development. Hong Kong's economy would also benefit. The financial services industry has displayed resilience under COVID, but the closure of the borders could hamper our status as an international financial hub. And the budget had no answer to this. The government should make wise decisions, and they must strike a balance between meeting imminent needs and long-term development. We should speed up infrastructure development and housing production. We should develop new areas swiftly to answer the chief executive's vision of a northern metropolis. $100 billion have been earmarked for the plan, and under the CWRF, an allocation will be provided for the infrastructure and transport works, and by the fourth quarter of this year, the preliminary plan for Lantau Tomorrow Vision would be announced. The government's promise to streamline the procedures, and they would invite public participation through a funding exercise, and the goal is to allow population intake as soon as possible. Hong Kong's land issues require a multi-pronged approach, so it is important to support the Northern Metropolis and Lantau Tomorrow Vision. In light of the fifth wave of the pandemic, Hong Kong's economy is fraught with uncertainties this year. Real GDP growth forecast is 2 to 3.5%, which was much lower than the 6.4% last year. According to the FS, in the last year, there was a surplus of $29 billion, which was much better than the expected $101.6 billion deficit. The housing reserves and future fund will see an influx, and we might still see a deficit. But given the reserve of some $900 billion, once COVID comes under control, the government can roll out more targeted measures to help revive our economy. As a whole, the budget this year is in line to tackle our current needs and our plans to integrate ourselves into the National Development Plan. Given the complex global political landscape and public health risks, we must be prudent, and we should focus on our core competitive strengths such as financial services, and we must focus on INT as well. I hope the budget can help Hong Kong step out of the current conundrum and boost our economy. I speak in support of the budget. Thank you. Ms. Chen Yutming. Thank you, Madam Deputy. As a whole, I support the Appropriation Bill 2022. This is the third budget since the COVID pandemic started, and the reserves will hit a record high of some $690 billion in 2022 to 23. Hong Kong's livelihood has suffered. Waiting time for public housing is 6 years. 230,000 people are living in subdivided units. Many are affected by the fifth wave, and the latest unemployment rebounded to 5%, or about 150,000 people. Many people expect more to be done by the government. At the Tagulang rural areas, I have supported anti-epidemic work. I found that many have moved out of the rural areas not to enjoy their retirement, but they have moved into temporary housing due to financial difficulties. These include school children, the unemployed, elderly people who live alone, the chronically ill, as well as residents who are stuck in Hong Kong due to the border closures. And they represent the plight of the grassroots, and their lives have been made even worse under the pandemic. This year, more alleviation measures would be offered, including an unemployment relief, the $10,000 electronic consumption vouchers, tax relief, the personal guarantee loan, SME financing guarantee scheme, etc. And the sixth round of anti-epidemic fund and the second round of ESS have been rolled out. These might not answer all calls, but at least they would be helpful to most. We should be flexible in helping people who have not been covered so far. And I like to offer my views on the Northern Metropolis in terms of livability and some of the anti-epidemic measures. From a macro perspective, to revive our economy, Hong Kong must integrate itself into the national development plans. And for this, we must accurately understand the National 14th Five-Year Plan, including the chapter on Hong Kong, which explains the expectations on Hong Kong's roles and positioning, and many opportunities have been offered. There were recent comments expressing concerns over Hong Kong's status as an international financial status. Hong Kong is unique in which we are part of China while facing the world. We have a holistic legal system, and we have a unique business environment. The Northern Metropolis must support emerging industries and the development of infrastructure. And within the Northern Metropolis, different circles will be created to create synergy with Shenzhen for Takuling, as well as it will dovetail with the Shuttlecock Ecological and Tourism Circle. The Northern Metropolis would encompass housing, help boost employment. Its geographical location is in line with the Hong Kong chapter under the National 14th Five-Year Plan. It is an important part of our integration into the nation's development. In the budget, the FS said $100 billion would be reserved under the Capital Works Reserve Fund as a dedicated fund. We must continue to pursue and speed up the work. This must not be empty talk. We will provide oversight on the next term of government, and a number of offensive facilities are still in place within the area, such as the expansion of the Northeast NT landfill near the border, and the sewage treatment plants, major quarantine facilities, etc. These would hamper our future developments as well as the interests of our future generation. The chief executive often talks about speeding up integration into the GBA, and the government should review the future planning of land between Hong Kong and Shenzhen to maximize their benefits. The Secretary for Development said during a Finance Committee meeting that the Northern Metropolis would take 3 years for the planning and engineering study. I believe most members here would not accept this timeline. The Development Bureau should further streamline the advanced planning study of the Northern Metropolis, or else Hong Kong would really suffer. And in terms of livability, the budget talked about the need to develop a green city as well as quality living. However, rural facilities are deeply lacking. They have been marginalized, and there is a steep contrast compared with urban areas. This is certainly unacceptable. Hong Kong is an international city. I believe many Hong Kong people do not know about the lack of infrastructure in rural areas, such as mobile communication infrastructure, refuse collection stations, etc. for Taku Ling. The infrastructure is severely outdated. The budget talked about a $8.4 billion for stormwater drainage to fight climate change and to enhance our flood prevention capabilities. But in the government's written reply, we saw that 9 rural projects have seen a serious delay, and in 2020 to 21, manpower provision was severely lacking. The government allocated $770 million to encourage telecom communicators to expand fiber communication services to remote villages, and in response, only 39 villages completed the relevant works. And by the end of this year, a 50% completion rate would be achieved. For rural areas, there are some 150 projects every year that are approved, and there are numerous villages in these areas. The government's only provided the funding without setting deadlines for rural minor projects, so many projects have been stalled, and many of them could not be completed in time. The government should allocate more resources to monitor the progress of the works and to introduce more rural minor works every year. We should not ignore the rural population, and going forward, the government should pay more attention to rural works, and this includes infrastructure development, and environmental hygiene should be improved as well.
Mr. Kenneth Lau. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I speak in support of the Appropriation Bill 2022. For this budget, it was announced while we were in the midst of the 5th wave of the pandemic. And in fact, our economy almost came to a standstill. I'm glad to see that the FS was willing to dip into the public coffers and come up with a budget worth $800 billion so that we go all out to fight the virus, easing the pressure on the SMEs, paving the way for economic revival, invest in the future, and facilitating the integration of Hong Kong into the rest of the nation. Well, I think the FS is trying to respond to the aspirations of the community and try to keep the economy going so as to sort of survive the storm together with the people. He must have our recognition. The budget was delivered at the time when we were most difficult. And in fact, there were many bottlenecks on all fronts. $67 billion have been set aside, $22 billion for rapid tests, and then $12 billion for the isolation facilities, $7.2 billion for equipment, and then money for vaccines as well. In this way, we are able to build our defense line against the virus. It shows that the government shows the determination to fight the virus as the most prevailing mission. And in fact, President Xi has said that being united in our fight against the virus is most important. With the concerted efforts of all quarters of the community, we are able to overcome the problem, and the daily number of cases has come down to a 3-digit figure. And of course, the SAR government will bear the main responsibility to fight the virus, paving the way for resumption of normal travel. money will be set aside to help the tourism industry. Since 2020, when there was the outbreak, the tourism industry was hardest hit. Many travel agents had closed. Many people were forced to leave the tourism industry. I hope that by getting this amount of money, the travel agents will develop new products so that we can pave our way and get ready for the resumption of normal travel without quarantine. Now, the fifth wave came quickly, and in fact, we were at the lowest point. Fortunately, Henry Cook's proposal was adopted by the FS. The FS gave us sweeteners, and then profits tax and service tax were reduced. There were subsidies for our electricity bills. CSSA recipients and OAA recipients were given a special allowance. And of course, this year, the middle class got something from the FS for the first time. That is, for the first time, we have this tax reduction for domestic rental expenses, so that everybody gets something like a sweetener. I think the FS is trying to treat everybody equal, so that everybody will get something so as to ease their financial pressure. I think he has gained some applause. Now that the epidemic has eased, social distancing measures have been relaxed. So I'm glad to see the revival of the catering industry and the retail industry. Again, I'm grateful to the FS for giving out the $10,000 electronic consumption vouchers. It can help with the revival of the economy. It can also promote electronic payment. For a number of months, we were able to see for ourselves that unless we live true to the philosophy of guarding against importation cases, preventing local transmission, and having dynamic zero infection, can we meet the need to safeguard the public health of this 7 million people city. And of course, it is also key to resumption of quarantine-free travel between the mainland and Hong Kong. We all want this to happen, and the SAR government must bear the prime responsibility to make sure that the anti-infection measures are in place. Madam Deputy, for the first time, this budget comes up with this idea. That is, we should introduce legislation to have a rental enforcement moratorium for tenants of specific sectors. I need to declare interest. My family has got rented properties, and we have got tenants. I think this is a good idea, and this is to allow a breathing space for the tenants, making sure that SMEs won't close across the board. But then this is going to have widespread impacts to prevent the closure of SMEs. But in fact, many stakeholders have told me that since the announcement by the FS, there would be a lot of lock-on effects, like small landlords may have cash flow problems, and then the tenants may not be able to repay the debt. And there are people who may abuse the law and trying to evade the rent and just abscond. I hope the legislation will be true to the government's promise. That is, while not denying landlords the right to collect rent, we are also not waiving the tenants' responsibility to pay rent. The government shouldn't intervene too much, otherwise we are just causing problems to the small landlords, and then it is a lose-lose situation for both tenants and landlords. For many years, we are worried, we are gloomy, we are pessimistic, and in fact the external environment is also changing all the time. COVID is also causing instability, and the government has a hard time. The government must try to find a new direction for us so that there will be social stability and economic prosperity. Well, in fact, among the major economies, only our motherland can maintain a positive economic growth. We should make good use of the one country, two systems. And our natural choice is to better integrate with the rest of the motherland. For the 14th five-year plan, we have been given a lot of support. I'm glad to see that $5 billion has been set aside in the budget to set up the GBA investment fund. The GBA will have a lot of opportunities. Through this fund, we can invest in different sectors, and I'm sure it will have a positive impact of our future development. In addition to investment, we need to do more so as to generate the largest benefits. For the Northern Metropolis strategic development strategy, I think this is echoing the Shenzhen Hong Kong development. I hope the new term government will continue with this idea. Shenzhen would like to develop its port economy. Hong Kong must respond, making use of the Northern Metropolis development so that we can have some synergy effect. But then the Northern Metropolis is going to cover a huge area, including a lot of private land. People wonder if the government has got the money to take care of that. I think the government should make sure that the finances are in place. Otherwise, the property owners will be negatively affected. Madam Deputy, we are going to see a change of government. But then the budget is going to stimulate the economy, relieve people's livelihood difficulties, and plan for the future and lay down a solid ground for future development. So I spoke in support of the Appropriation Bill 2022. Mr. Michael Tian. Madam Deputy, my views on the budget have already been made public previously. But still, I would like to say the following. I'm sure the FS would welcome my views. Now, the budget measures have been implemented and the pandemic has eased. So I just want to update my comments and response. For the budget, the largest attraction would be the $10,000 consumption voucher. I gave recognition to this on the same day the budget was delivered. There were ideas to give out cash. I think still consumption vouchers are good. There are more pros than cons. I said that it should have a longer validity period, at least 6 months, so that people can come out to spend the money when they are more confident, more comfortable. Good that the FS took this on board. And we should allow people to use this to buy daily necessities. It's best if people can buy their groceries at markets. But unfortunately, at our markets, the take-up rate of octopus payment is still low. I asked for this to be incorporated into the renewal conditions. Last week, the government said that contactless payment would be included. I made it a point that octopus card should be mandated because it is the easiest way, in particular for the elderly people. For the Leave Home Safe app as well as the vaccine pass, the experience tells us that elderly people find it difficult to use such devices. And then I would like to talk about stimulating the economy. I asked for the vouchers to be given over 2 phases, 2,500 each time for 2 months each, so as to have more consumption. Of course, this hasn't happened. I think you are still thinking about arrangements for the second part of the consumption voucher. Well, since 2018, I've been fighting for this. And all out of a sudden, we were given a happy surprise. I think we should thank you for covering the water bills. And then for the rental enforcement moratorium for tenants. At first, I thought it was not a good idea because sooner or later you have to pay your rent. So I said there should be sort of ways to encourage landlords to cut their rent. I have been fighting for this for a long time, so it shows that by revising the scheme, you are listening to us. More and more landlords are taking the initiative to cut rent by talking to their tenants, because by this they will be excluded from the new legislation. For small landlords, of course, if they can't collect their rent, they may be pursued by their banks for failing to pay their mortgage loans. Of course, you have the 100% personal loan guarantee scheme for individuals. You can try to apply for a loan up to $100,000. So the scheme was proposed. You listened to us, and then there was an overhaul of the scheme. I have to praise you for being so responsive. I think this is the first time that you have done a good job. Now, I want to talk about the budget in relation to its greatest failings. I think less than 100 characters were spent on RCHEs. For the Omicron, the residents of the RCHEs suffered most. They lacked equipment, they lacked supplies, and then staff members didn't get enough help. When the defense line was broken, there was a knock-on effect, and it shows that the government has always overlooked the role played by the RCHEs. I think we should consider the needs more. Now, for many policy bureaus, I've been asking for community nannies to be given more help. They should be sort of formalized. EV charging infrastructure, etc., are also close to my heart. I asked the FS, and then FS said that he would be the person signing off the checks, and that would be up to individual policy bureaus to make proposals. Now, on this occasion, I was surprised by the many initiatives included. So I hope in the future the FS will also be more proactive, like what he has done this time, instead of just signing off the checks. So I hope the FS will steer and lead the policy bureaus, like the MTR fares. Owing to historic reasons, it is cheaper in the east than in the west. And then for Tuen Mun residents, you pay more than when you are in Shengshui. And for the past year, I asked the administration to make use of the opportunity of the commissioning of the Sha-Tin Central Line, so as to drive down drastically what is involved. In fact, the government owns the line entirely, so the government can make use of the window, a matter of $300 million. And then per kilometer, there can be a reduction of 15% of the fares. And then we can address the imbalance. But then for the THB, its answer is funny. It would not want to intervene. The government would rather leave it in the hands of the MTR in relation to the annual adjustments. Now, for MTR fares, everybody will give you the thumbs up if you reduce the fares. Even if you put it by just 0.01%, you will attract criticism. So the KCR is owned by the government, and the government can really do something about it. And then for the question of regulating childcare services, I would hold the FS responsible, because you spend $20 billion on 165 organizations to help the needy people in the society, the elderly, the children, the grassroots, the disabled. So how many cases are hidden? There is like the Hong Kong Society for the Protection of Children. They collected subvention from the government, and yet they were doing things that were against our expectations. So FS, you are pulling the strings of the public purse. You have a role to play. You need to oversee the departments, which in turn oversee the NGOs. Departments should audit the organizations. The FS should also audit the departments. Because ultimately, the money comes from the government. School children have to do the rapid tests every day. Test kits would not be made available because the government would like to focus on the needy. But what about the anti-infection service kits? They were available to everybody. And even for the reusable face masks, again, everybody got one. So it seems that you are changing your mind all the time. It is confusing. There's also one other point. Whichever is compulsory, mandatory, then it should be free. If you mandate the daily test, how come that you expect the citizens to pay for it themselves? It is a very serious problem. You are creating a precedent. I think you need to rethink this. For the rapid test kits, make it free to all the schools. It is just not palatable. I think my time is up, so I spoke. Thank you.
Next one, Lam Chun Sing. Thank you, Chairman. For the budget, I would describe it as a document that actually provides new ideas and, yes, can provide an outline preparations for future economic development. It's quite comprehensive. In terms of relieving people's hardship, the budget proposes reducing salary tax and raise concessions for electricity bills and also the distribution of e-consumption vouchers. It does provide timely help to the public. And after the fifth wave, I think we can help restore public confidence. The budget also shows a new thinking looking for changes. The government has responded to our request from FLU, and they're offering actually trying to reduce the economic pressure of people not owning their own homes. And it's also a moratorium on chasing tenants for the rents. The financial secretary knows that in this very extraordinary times, extraordinary means have to be sought. Even though there is controversy over the suggestion, the government has tried to balance various opinions and have also launched related measures to help small landlords who rely on rents for their living. I hope that the measure can really help SMEs ride out the difficult economic times. As for the government's extending the 100% personal loan guarantee scheme, the application period, and also to increase the maximum loan, we welcome the measures, but FLU and other labor concern groups think that unemployment loan is only an expedient means, and for any one-off scheme, that's not really the most ideal solution to help the unemployed. And also, in the sixth round of anti-epidemic fund, the temporary unemployed, the distribution of $10,000 to them, well, there are more than actually 400,000 people applying. It means that there's a big demand from the unemployed for financial support. But unfortunately, those measures are one-off measures only. The labor sector has always asked the government for the setting up of a recurrent unemployment support scheme, so those workers who are laid off or out of work can receive financial support. I hope that the government can introduce clearer application criteria to avoid abuse of the system and to come up with a clear timetable and turn the assistance to the employed into a regular assistance scheme so that we can now create a new system to provide timely help for the unemployed. So in case anyone who's because of the pandemic or economic restructuring loses the job, they will not be out of financial support. Now, economic recovery will be an important topic, and the worldwide trend now is to develop INT businesses, and that will be the main driving force for future economic development. So we support the allocation of resources to support startups and technology, including the reservation of $10 billion to provide life and health scientific research, and also to provide strategic tech fund in support of potential startups. We need to develop the entire value chain to turn Hong Kong into an international INT hub and to provide overall planning and support for the development of the hub. To develop local startups, it can actually promote economic growth and create new jobs. In the long run, it can also reshape Hong Kong's economic structure and to address the perennial issue of Hong Kong's being solely based on one or two sectors. We want to have a vision for Hong Kong after the new government has come into power. We hope that the same policy can be maintained. And whether it's innovation, technology, or other economic pillars in Hong Kong, we need to have talents. In order to attract talents, overseas talents into Hong Kong, that's of course important. But nurturing local talents and developing a talent bank is also very important. And that's something that needs to be continuously or sustainably developed. Hong Kong government has been promoting VPAT education, but not enough has been done. The latest budget only supports supports a pilot scheme in relation to VPAT and also a pilot scheme in international learning. The government is also reviewing and optimizing the project or the Diploma Yijin program. I think for the issue of Yijin graduates having difficulty in looking for jobs, there should be a revamp of the scheme, and to in line with market needs, provide market-oriented curriculum, and to increase students' chances for internships. So SMEs can create more trainee or internship posts for young people to attract them to join in doing technical jobs. And there should be more applied subjects offered, even applied degree places, so young people can see that there can be various routes for their career development. Lastly, I hope that as the Financial Secretary said in his speech, this year marks the 25th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to China. This is a new starting point, a milestone for Hong Kong. With the national security law and the improvement of the electoral system, Hong Kong has returned to a normal path, and the public expects Hong Kong, as mentioned in the speech, that Hong Kong can be developed into a fairer, more just, caring, and inclusive society. I support the Appropriation Bill 2022 in this second reading. Chairman, I just spoke. Next one, Dr. Tik Chi Yun. Chairman, third side strongly